So in premise and conclusion form, Roger White's argument looks like this. Premise 1. If a fact E that we observe stands in need of explanation, and hypothesis H provides a satisfactory explanation for E, and one that is better than any alternative explanation available, then E provides significant evidential support for H. That's just a restatement, in slightly fancier terms, of the idea of inference to the best explanation. It remains a pretty good principle. Premise 2, that our universe is hospitable to life, stands in need of explanation. That God adjusted the constants in order to allow for life to develop provides a satisfactory explanation for why our universe is hospitable to life. Premise 4, there is no comparably satisfying explanation of this fact available. Conclusion, that our universe is hospitable to life provides significant evidential support for the hypothesis that God adjusted the constants. The argument is valid. Is it sound? And is it the kind of argument that's going to be potentially convincing to the reasonable agnostic? Well, premise 1, as we said, looks pretty good. Let's look at premise 2. And let's try to make sense of what it is for a fact to be in need of explanation. Some things need explanation and some things don't. So, for example, if I roll a die and I get a 5, you could ask me, why did you get a 5 rather than a 4? Why is it that of all the numbers you could have gotten, you got a 5 rather than a 4? And one might think, I'm perfectly happy not being able to explain that. There's no demand for me to explain that. Maybe there is some explanation that could be given in terms of the preconditions of the universe and the laws of physics of that fact, but I don't really need to be able to give such an explanation. And I'm perfectly happy saying it just happened by chance, which is to say, really, that I'm not giving an explanation at all of it. After all, that it happened by chance doesn't explain why it landed 5 rather than a 4. And even if in the die case there could be some explanation given in terms of the laws of physics, if we ask, why did this atom decay today rather than yesterday, there is going to be no explanation in terms of physics for why that event occurred. Now, this doesn't bother me. I don't feel as if the atoms decaying today is the kind of thing that needs to be explained. But Roger White says some things do need to be explained. And they include the cosmological constants having the values they do. OK, so why is that? Well, Roger White says life is a valuable thing. It's antecedently very surprising that life should exist, given that it's so much more interesting. A world in which life exists is so much more interesting than a world in which life doesn't exist. So that, it just so happened that the cosmological constants be in the precise values that would contribute to the development of this interesting thing is the kind of thing we need an explanation for. We can't just say it happened by chance. That's not satisfying. Now, one way to reject White's argument is to get off the boat right here and to say, no, clearly that we live in a world that is hospitable to life is not the kind of thing that demands an explanation. And something that would motivate you to think this would be if you believed in the multiverse, in the idea that the universe that we see around us is just one part of a vast array of universes, all of which constitute the big universe, the reality in which we live. So in our universe, the gravitational constant is as it is. There's another universe in which the gravitational constant is 0.1% weaker, and another one in which it's 0.2% weaker, and another one in which it's 0.3% weaker, and so on and so forth, and for all the physical constants. For any possible values the physical constants might have had, there is a universe in which the physical constants have that value. So, in some of the universes in this grand multiverse, we find conditions hospitable to life. In others, we don't. If that's how things are, and there are many physicists who take seriously the idea that that is how things are, then it's not obvious that there's any interesting question of the form, why does it happen that our universe is one in which life exists? I mean, look, there are many universes. Some of them are life hospitable, some aren't. It's not at all surprising that we be in one of the life hospitable ones. Of course, we're living creatures. Of course, we're going to be in a bit of the universe that's hospitable to life. That's not surprising. Acting surprised, acting as if there was some deep question here, is a little bit like acting surprised if, say, you're wandering around a vast mansion. Imagine you're wandering around a vast mansion, and there are many empty rooms. And then there are some rooms with living things in them. And then you wander into a room, and you look around surprised, and you say, gosh, isn't it surprising that this is a room with life in it? Of course you're going to be in a room with life in it, because you are life. Likewise, of course you are going to be in a bit of the multiverse that contains the conditions that will be suitable to the development of living things, because you have developed as a living thing. This is not surprising. So the premise only really gets traction if we disregard that, the multiverse hypothesis, and we assume that our universe is all there is. There's only one universe in all there is, and it's ours. And the physical constants are the way they are, and there are no further universes with different physical constants. Then the argument gets traction. Let's suppose there is no multiverse, and let's look closely at this issue of what makes a certain fact surprising and in need of an explanation. I arrive at some Scrabble tiles. There they are. A splatter of Scrabble tiles on the table. What do I think about them? They're arranged in a very particular way. Is it surprising that they're arranged in that way? Is they're being arranged in this way, the kind of thing that calls for an explanation? You might look at them and think, no, we're perfectly happy not giving an explanation of why they happen to be arranged in that particular way, by saying they happen to be arranged that way but just by chance. But notice now that if we draw a line around the outside of the arrangement of tiles and read from left to right from your point of view, we see howdy there, partner. Howdy there, partner. That's odd, I might think. Does the arrangement now stand in need of an explanation? Yeah, you might think. Of course it stands in need of an explanation. And there's a natural one. Somebody has faffed with these tiles. Somebody arranged these tiles in this particular way. And of course, really, they did. One might think that what made that arrangement of tiles so surprising, so in need of an explanation, was the fact that it was incredibly antecedently unlikely that the outside rim of tiles would spell a word in English. It was the improbability in advance of them spelling a word in English that made me think it was so surprising that they did. But that can't be exactly right, because take another arrangement of tiles, this one. Now, the tiles on the outside rim, read from left to right, read Iso ki idam kerma. That is not a surprising arrangement of tiles. It doesn't stand in need of an explanation. I don't feel, in light of looking at these, that somebody was there arranging the tiles on the table, I feel they might quite well have arisen by chance. And yet, of course, it was tremendously antecedently unlikely that the tiles would be arranged in exactly this pattern. That when the tiles were all shuffled up, they would spell exactly those letters. That was tremendously unlikely, just as unlikely as them reading "Howdy there, partner." So what this shows is that part of what seems to us surprising and part of what seems to us in need of explanation has to do with what our prior expectations are. Suppose that wandering around in this studio, there was somebody who spoke a language, and I knew this in advance. There was somebody who spoke a language in which "sok id amikerma" meant "howdy there, partner." If I were then to be confronted with this arrangement of tiles, I would think it was surprising that it just so happened that the tiles were arranged in a way that spelt "howdy there, partner" in that person's language. And I would think, probably what's gone on is that that person has arranged the tiles in that way, that it didn't just happen by chance. So you will find this fact that the cosmological constants are at values that are life-hospitable to be surprising and in need of an explanation, only if you have some confidence before thinking about the cosmological constants and before being confronted with this argument that there's a life-loving God out there with the power to set the cosmological constants at whatever values he likes. Now, that is to say, the argument is not going to convince somebody who starts off entirely initially skeptical concerning the existence of God that there's a God. But it might convince somebody who has even a small degree of initial confidence in the idea that there's a God. I mean, look at the tiles again, or think of the tiles again, and think of the "howdy there, partner" case. If I even was pretty sure that I was alone in the building, suppose that I've been doing this on my own. Scrabble tiles are on the table. I'm pretty confident nobody's been around here faffing with the tiles. I then come in. If I read "howdy there, partner" in the tiles, even though I was pretty confident there was nobody else around, I'm going to become very confident there was somebody around. And so, as long as we've got some confidence, Roger White might say, that there's a life-loving God out there, the fact that the cosmological constants were set at just the values that that life-loving God would like should make us very confident that there is such a God. So maybe Roger White has shown us that we do have some evidence that God exists. But of course, that has to be weighed against any evidence that we might have that God does not exist, that there's no thing like God around. And many people have thought that we do have such evidence. We can put that in the form of an argument against the existence of God. And that's going to be our topic for next time. We're going to look and see if there are good arguments against the existence of God. And we'll look at the most emotionally powerful one, which is sometimes called the problem of evil. In a nutshell, if a good God exists, why do so many bad things happen?